I'd like to call the February 16th, 2021 meeting of the Board of Public Safety to order. First of all, I would like a motion to approve the January 19th, 2021 minutes.
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor? We don't have to roll call that, I do not believe, correct?
I think that we typically do just.
We do? Okay, all right.
Yeah, please go ahead and call roll.
Okay,
Only because we're doing things virtually. Thank you.
Yeah. Kim,
yes.
McQuiba,
Yes.
Luis,
Yes.
Trudy.
Yes.
All right, do I have a motion to approve the February 9th special session minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Roll call, please.
Sorry, I was making Rafi a co-host so he could join the meeting.
Oh,
Hello.
Kim,
yes.
McQuiba,
Yes.
Luis,
Yes.
Trudy,
Yes.
and Rafi, are you ready? We're voting on one of the minutes.
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay. Would you like to vote on this one or do you want to join on the next?
I'll abstain.
Okay.
Okay. All right, next we're moving on to fire department business.
All right, thank you. So you have our statistics and we are below our normal, even again for January. You can see IU was well below their normal. We did have a major fire on January 28th. That is the house fire with a fatality. It is not a fire fatality. It is still undergoing investigation with BPD and other state entity resources. And then for our response times, if you were not present for the State of the Public Safety Address, Dave Askins from B-Squared Beacon called into question this particular graphic. We are digging into it, but from an initial look, we do have an issue with the way that this has been reported. So our automated system that we run this report from kind of groups all the response times. And when we started digging into it, we've run into not only that issue, but several. So I'm going to report it as it is today, which is the 82 and 95%. But I am telling you that this graphic will have to be updated. And we were planning on doing all these updates to our data reporting anyway, but it's now an even better time to do it. But essentially the thing that was called into question is exactly what our graphic shows, which is we've been claiming compliance for up to 4 minutes, and yet it's 4 minutes to 4:59 has been marked in the box. And that is a residual from when we used to have a 5-minute response goal. And that never was caught and that never got cleaned up. But we are also finding other issues. So what we're going to look at is the legitimate national standards, which has a breakdown of how long did it take you to get from the call to the truck? How long did it take you to get from the station to the event? And that is actually broken down into several different types of responses. So a fire response does not have the same requirements as an emergency medical response. So again, look for that graphic to be updated. I can't tell you exactly when, but it will have to be updated because this one is wrong.
Chief, can I ask you quickly on that point? Very
Yes.
quickly. So is that to say that what you see above is not connected to what you see below? That being, so the 82% is not reflected on what we see on those bars. So the two may be correct separately. We just don't know what the above and below, they're not talking to each other. Is that what
Yes.
you're saying?
Yeah, so what I am saying is the top of the reported times are correct. Our percentage of compliance with that goal, the way that it has been stated, is incorrect.
Mhm.
Oh, so they are connected. So the
They are
82%,
connected.
the 82% is for the 459 and below.
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
For prevention and public engagement, we are still seeing some problems with COVID. We also did have an anomaly that was not caught on the social media side. So for our Facebook likes, you'll notice that in 2020, it is higher than in 2021. So that was an issue. We maintain 3 Facebook pages for the fire department. It's the main fire department page, our history page, and then our auxiliary for the spouse auxiliary. So whoever reported the stats forgot to add the 3 pages together. So I want to make note of that it is actually, as of today, 6,362 total for Facebook. On training and education, we're above the mark. We have transitioned in how we're doing training in 2021.
Chief,
So, yes.
I'm sorry, can I interrupt you just very briefly?
Sure.
To go back to the prevention and public engagement statistics, when you refer to social media, just out of curiosity, do you leave, is the page set up that the public can comment?
Yes.
Or is it that they can only give likes and dislikes?
Nope. We don't have it set where it blocks commenting or anything of that nature.
Okay. I guess in the future, it'd be good to kind of get maybe a synopsis of just some of the comments, particularly if they're directly related to the way the BFD engages members of the public.
Okay. Just for clarification, is that just a synopsis report that we can provide to you, or do you want a detailed explanation of?
No, I think more from if somebody was being selective about the comments, it would be, again, content. I think that would be befitting of BFD's engagement with the public. I mean, if those were certainly, recommendations about things that and ways that we can improve, and certainly comments about any existing programs that you might host. That would be, my preference, but I certainly want to have discussion with members of the board in order to make sure that I'm not just unilaterally kind of making a decision about what statistics would be reported. If that makes sense.
So just to clarify, because social media is such a highly used medium now, you want to know what prevalent feedback is coming through that channel. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, I think essentially in looking at the data that's reported, Facebook likes are, like, from my perspective, those are inconsequential unless I have some sort of corresponding photo, something related to a specific event. And so I think written comment would probably, in this case, be more effective, but I don't want the chief to feel like he has to now task somebody to, write down every comment. If someone enjoyed it, I think it's more or less related to the program, certainly ways that we can improve the program, or excuse me, certain ways that BFD can be more effective with some of the programs, what worked, what didn't work, those sorts of things. But as I was stating, that would be my preference, and I wouldn't want to make this decision on behalf of the board. So if it's something that we table for discussion at some later time, or if you all are in agreement with me, like, hey, Rafi, sounds like a great idea, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I guess I'll await feedback from the collective group, but obviously anything you want to see, we're always willing to change it, how it's displayed to you, and get you information. I would say that this is being displayed to kind of show our media reach. So Facebook likes are the equivalent of Instagram followers and Twitter followers. So it's what's our engagement with our public. But this obviously doesn't show, like when we did our job posting where we got 45,000 engagement on our numbers for engagement from our social media feed. So I'm always willing, but I'll wait for direction from the board on how we want to better portray that information.
And Chief, yeah, I wouldn't look at it as kind of an inaccurate source. But when you talk about reach, for instance, you brought up how many university students still may not be aware that the area below the stove is not storage. And so if you are hosting a program related to events like that, it'd be great to see like, wow, I learned today that, that area below my stove is not storage for plastic things. So I think from that perspective, I'm just looking at it in much of the same way that you do. I think, we all know in terms of accuracy, reliability, and so forth of social media. So, and I don't want to drag this out.
Okay, thank you. The last one I had was our training, which is above the minimum. And I want to point out that we are focusing on core skills, and we're also, we do have a new online training platform that came online last year. But the goal is not only having that for better tracking, but not to lose touch with, this is a very hands-on career. So you should see our numbers continue to stay stable. And what I will tell you is not only the numbers stable, but the quality of training is also going up as well. And with that, that is the end of the statistics.
Letters of appreciation and commendation.
Don't have any listed to show
Okay.
tonight.
All righty. Then we move on to the Bloomington Police Department report.
We would
There
like
was-
to finish general
Mayor.
business.
Oh, I'm
and all that?
sorry. Apologies. Yeah.
Sorry.
Let me scroll back up. General business.
Okay. For general business, if it's okay, if I may just join the general business with our personnel, because it was all kind of rolled together. We are working on some social media posting with everything that is doing with the snowstorm. And we're getting good engagement on that. But beyond that, I do have 6 current firefighter openings, 1 fire inspection officer opening. I have a projected vacancy at the end of this month. In March, we have 3 more vacancies due to retirement. So we don't have anyone on light duty that I'm aware of at this point. And that would be the end of general business and also the personnel business.
Great. And any anticipated major expenditures that we should be looking for to approve?
The only thing is something that we mentioned last month with delays with snow. We're still waiting on the delivery of our 100-foot aerial over at Station 2, which will be over $1 million. Other than that, I don't have anything that's on my list for tonight.
All righty. And other personnel issues?
Nothing. I know we have an agenda item for a particular one that's later, but that's it for fire department business.
Okay. Now we move to police department business.
Okay. Trying to get things to work here. So you all have in your packet the monthly statistics. And if you want me to go over those, I can, but I would rather focus on statistics from last year that we presented at the public safety press conference that we had, I believe, last week. Is that all right?
That would be great. Can I just ask in future, can you let us know when that's happening? So we
Sure.
tune in? That'd be great. Thanks.
So there is a page in your packet. It's called 2020 yearly stats. And so what I thought I would do is kind of go over that. It's a comparison of last year's statistics with 2019 statistics. And if you look at the very first box, NIBRS is how we categorize crime statistics now, where we used to use UCR, which is a Uniform Crime Report. NIBRS is the National Incident-Based Reporting System, which all law enforcement agencies are being required to change to per the FBI guidelines. And so if you notice, we had decreases in crimes against persons and crimes against society, and there was a slight increase in 2020 over 2019 for crimes against property. Overall, there was a 6.69% decrease in total crime that was reported to the FBI. If you look at the next box, that kind of breaks out the crimes against persons. There was a large increase last year in the number of homicides that we had, but pretty much everything else decreased in crimes against persons. Crimes against society, you can see that had a 27% decrease in 2020 over 2019. And the last category is crimes against property. And we had a slight increase in burglaries and in frauds and in motor vehicle thefts. The vehicle thefts last year, we had a couple of trends where there were just a few people responsible for quite a few of the vehicle thefts that we had. One of those series that we had was people, a certain person was stealing vehicles and then turning them into rentals and putting them out on the internet for people to rent. So those are those statistics for last year. The next page has got some traffic stop information, and we had a big decrease in the number of traffic stops in 2020 versus 2019. And you can see those numbers in that chart. Big thing that we talked about in the public safety press conference, though, was gun violence. We had a 52% increase in cases where guns were used to perpetrate a crime. Four out of the 5 homicide cases we had involved the use of a firearm. And we had 41 cases that documented a single or multiple guns being stolen in 2020 for a total of 77 guns that were stolen. A little bit of information on gun permits. In 2019, for the county, we had a total of 13,441 gun permits issued. In 2020, we had 14,963. So you can see for the city of Bloomington in 2019, we had 799 permit requests, and in 2020, we had 1,722. I will make note of the Indiana legislature trying to change the gun permit laws for the state, where they would make it, Indiana would become a constitutional carry, which would not require people to have a gun permit to be able to carry a firearm. I spoke last week at the legislature against that, because that would do away with background checks and other information that law enforcement agencies use when granting permits as to whether or not a person is what the state considers an acceptable person to carry a firearm, which means they don't have a criminal background that would prohibit that, or they don't have any types of mental illnesses that would prohibit that. So the next slide basically.
You take off.
Yes.
If I can interrupt you too, and I think I'd also add too that I know that to obtain a permit in 2020, I believe it was the 2-year permit, absolutely free.
Yes, that was one of the changes that they made last year in the legislature, where gun permits for the 5-year permit used to cost, or there was a fee associated with that, and they waived that fee. There still is a fee for the lifetime permit, but under this new legislation, that would do away with that fee also.
Right. Okay.
There's a slide in there on training. In 2020, we had a total of 8,943 hours of in-service training, which is over 3.5 times, and that's multiplied out by the officers. That's 3.5 times more than what is required by the state of Indiana. And you can see in that slide some examples of the types of instruction that officers received last year. Deputy Chief Qualters had mentioned, I think at the last meeting, that we would be providing some information on training for 2021. There's a page in your packet that goes over a lot of that. One of the big things that we're instituting is a training program called ICAT, which is Integrated Communications Assessment and Tactics. It's a de-escalation training program that is developed by the Police Executive Research Forum. It is an evidence-based program that has proven to show success in de-escalating a lot of situations where people that we deal with are not injured as a result of that training. So you can see the schedule by month as to what types of training we're going to do. I won't repeat that since it's in your packet, and you can see that.
Chief, if I can interrupt, can you perhaps hint at some discussion about, the changes in terms of policies and practices as a result of any of these trainings? Like, so if there's been any changes relative to, I guess, internal things within the police department, and realizing that most of the time the training that, the assumption that training that law enforcement does get is kind of, are things compliant with the state. But when I see things like interview schools and community policing, I'm interested to know, we went through this training, or all BPD officers went through this training. So subsequently, what did change, or what did they learn? What has it led to a change in policies and practices?
Well, I think that's probably would take a lot more time than we have.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So and maybe we can talk offline as to what you want, and we can work on that then.
Yeah, but and again, I know that would be also something that I'd like the board to consider collectively. I think, certainly as we get information in about training, initiatives, programming, objectives, anything as it relates to the professional development of city employees, what subsequently does that mean, from a perspective of change, or looking at these training opportunities as education, but also intervention. What is changing as a result of officers going through these particular things? And that's more of a statement, not a question.
I want to chime in a little bit. I appreciate that thought. So just to follow up off of that, it's just understanding once officers complete ICANT, I think that's the acronym for it.
ICANT.
What's the accountability if something happens after this officer have completed this training? Like, what happens?
Since I don't think any of you are probably familiar with ICAT training, I will send you some materials that will kind of go over that and what the training outcomes would be, so that you can read that for yourselves.
Sounds good.
So if you look at one of the next slides, it's the monthly statistics. We had 428 training hours in January. There's some highlights there. We had no community engagement because we still are not doing any of that because of COVID. This police social worker had 15 referrals and had a total of 216 contacts. We're in the process of adding 2 more social workers. We're just finishing up the hiring process on that. The neighborhood resource specialist had a total of 59 calls for service. You can see the breakdown of those types of calls. We also are in the process of hiring 2 more neighborhood resource people, so that we'll have a total of 4. And we're in the final stages of that process. The other slides are just some more monthly statistics that I will let you review. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me and ask those. That concludes the statistics and training report.
All righty. Letters of accommodation or commendation?
We had 2 that are in your packet. One was recognizing Officer Brian Warner for the way he interacted with a person who was having some mental health issues at a bank downtown. And the other one was for Officer Justin Tabor for, it was from a detective in Lawrence County involving a case that he helped that detective with, and those are in your packets for your review.
Right. Is there any other general business?
I have no other general business. I touched on the public safety press conference already, which was last week. So.
And any upcoming purchases we should be on the lookout for? Significant.
I don't believe so.
And lastly, personnel issues.
You had a special session last week where all 6 people accepted the conditional offer of employment to be police officers. So we will be finishing up that process. And we're also finishing up the hiring of the social workers and the neighborhood resource specialists.
Quick question.
Oh, go ahead.
Quick question there. Are there any more vacancies for your department?
Yes.
Okay. How many? Okay.
So we have 92 people currently. Adding 6 gets us to 98. We were capped at 100, so we still have 2 openings, and there are probably 2 officers that may be leaving the department in the next month or so.
Okay. Thank you.
And I wanted to ask, I'm sure I'm not the only one who misses the opportunity to meet the new hires and congratulate them. Maybe in future we can figure out a way to do that via Zoom.
Chief, your just to follow up on Waquipa's question, is the social work positions that you mentioned, are they outside of
Yes.
the?
They're not considered officer, so that's outside of the officer hirings.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chief. I don't believe we have any old business. Is that correct, Chris?
That is correct.
Okay. And CIRT ARV deployment reports.
There were none in January.
And certification of payroll, we do that electronically.
It's correct for the police department.
And it is correct for
Great.
fire.
Thank you. All right, now we move on to the Bloomington Fire Department grievances. And I believe we're going to, get some context from Chris for this before.
So I just wanted, thank you. This is Chris Wheeler, Assistant City Attorney, City of Bloomington. I just wanted to say, because we do these so very rarely, I wanted to speak to the board very briefly about this. We, in the fire department's union contract, there is a procedure for grievances, and there are several steps and that are required to be taken before a grievance would even reach this point where the board would have an opportunity to hear the grievance. Well, our 2 tonight, each one of which has reached that point where the board can now hear the grievance. It's under Part 4 of Section 22 of the union contract discussing grievances. That union contract to you for review. So tonight we are hearing 2 grievances, and this is not the last step. So I hazard a guess that if the board is to uphold the grievance, that the city would likely request that the matter be taken to arbitration. If the city decides on either one of these, and if the city if the board decides to deny either grievance or both, I would hazard a guess that the union would want to take this matter up to arbitration. That is the next step. It's a non-binding arbitration. So it's likely that this is not the last stop for this discussion, but Tonight, the board gets to hear these two grievances, and the steps that we will follow are as follows. We're going to hear the matter of Fire Member Welch. I think I'm saying his last name correctly. I'm trying to go by memory, and I apologize if I said that wrong. But Fire Member Welch initially. And what we will do is have the union representative, and that is Jordan Canada, who is here tonight. He will speak first, giving a presentation of his side of the union's position. And then we will hear from the fire department's attorney, Jennifer Lloyd, who is here, and she will give a discussion of the city's position. Thereafter, the board will have an opportunity at the end of each of those two discussions to ask questions. So when Jordan Canada is finished, the board may ask questions of Jordan Canada. When Jennifer Lloyd is finished, the board may ask questions of Jennifer Lloyd. I don't know if either side has anybody else who's going to speak on behalf of the union or the fire department, but certainly they're welcome to do so. After all questions and discussion is over, the board will then have its discussion and make a motion on either to uphold or deny. And then we'll move on to the next one, and we'll follow the exact same procedure with the union going first, the city going second, with questions asked at the end of each discussion. And then the board will move into its own discussion and make motions appropriately at that time. Any questions from anyone before we launch into this?
Okay.
For the procedure. I'm going to hand it back over to
I think me? Okay. Mr. Canada, we'd love to hear from you, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, let me try to get this worked out. Okay, so we had two members who filed a grievance. As Chris said, it has now got to step 4 of our contract. This grievance is based on vacation days and benefit time. In the past, any member that has resigned or retired has been entitled to all of their vacation days. These two members in particular, Chris Welch and Steve Coover, are 20+ year guys. So they get the max amount of allotted vacation days. I believe it is 12 for Chris and 13 with Steve Coover from the rollover on the COVID benefit day. And if Mccarter wants to talk as well, he's able to, he's our vice president. He can help me get the facts cleared up. But these two guys had set up their time to leave, just like anyone in the past has, by scheduling their coming in, working, and then taking their allotted days. I believe on December 31st, they received a letter from Chief Moore stating that that they are citing the city policy of a prorated day, which I believe in the materials that we submitted, that is section 8.05. And that, if you guys read that closely, you will see that it says for part-time employees, and we are covered under our collective bargaining agreement. And in our CBA, in your first year, another examples that we sent to you is in your first year, you do not receive any vacation days. And then after your first year, you get your allotted days. So a 5-year guy gets 5 vacation days. And then when you get to your 6th year, you get 6 days. And it keeps building how it is labeled in our CBA. So with that said, 2 20-year guys, they should get their 12 days, their 12 vacation days. And then there's also Kelly days. Initially, we had met, myself and Vice President Mccarter met with Jennifer Lloyd, Carolina Shaw, and Philippa Guthrie. And our request was to get these guys just paid their vacation days, their time out. And that was essentially denied by the city, or they would have been gone January 1st. So now we are here to the step 4 of the grievance process from our past practices, that guys who intend to retire or resign, they come in that year that they are allotted their days, as it states in our CBA, and they take their days off just like anyone else. But the city is now citing the employee handbook, which differs from our CBA. And if Mccarter has any comments, he's more than welcome to do that.
Yeah, I'd just like to add to that a little bit.
And I'm sorry, would you please state your name, just because we're recording this? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Robert Mccarter, Jr., Vice President of Local 586 Union. I've been involved with this step, I think, since the first day, speaking with HR at City of Bloomington and Jennifer Lloyd. And so this has been a past practice of Bloomington City Fire for 35 plus years. That basically what happens is a guy decides to retire, comes in January 1st, works one day, then schedules his vacation days. And then since 2017 with the Kelly days that replaced city days in the previous contract that year, they've been able to stack their Kelly days on top of it. So they get their full amount of vacation days with Kelly days, and then they're done. They pretty much retire.
Robert, I'm
yes.
sorry to interrupt. Could you clarify what a Kelly Day is?
So Kelly Day is the easiest way. It's earned every 16 weeks, I believe. And so, for instance, my Kelly Day is on a Monday, and then I won't get that Monday off until another 16 weeks later, I believe is the actual timeline. So it's basically every other Monday that my 24-hour shift falls on, I have off. And the city implemented that to kind of cut down on FLSA overtime, which is our overtime that we get allotted. And so it kind of cuts into that a little bit. But that's, if that makes sense, Kim, I hope it does.
Yes, thank you, I think.
So like Jordan said, we sat down with these two individuals, and they just requested their vacation days at the beginning of the year, is all they wanted to do. And then they got denied to take their vacation days. And then the city, like Jordan said, stated in the employee handbook 805, which is employees resigning in benefit time, I believe. But I also believe that, and this is one of the arguments that the union brought up, is that section 8.0 for paid time off is the second line down. It says benefit time for union eligible employees is governed by their collective bargaining agreement in section 8.0, which, and it says that right there in the employee handbook that we're excluded from that it's covered in our employee or in our collective bargaining agreement, and it doesn't apply to the city handbook. We're just trying to figure out how come 35 years of past practice is no longer okay. And I know this is an argument for employee Chris Welch and Steve Coover because it's affecting them, but this is also going to affect everyone else. And that's why the union has brought this up as a major grievance. And just like Chris Wheeler stated earlier, you don't see this very often. The union doesn't come to the Board of Public Safety for grievances. This is going to affect every single person that retires or moves on from the fire department from now on. You have anything else to add, Canada?
Yeah, if I could just back up a little bit to the Kelly days, as it is stated in our contract, I believe it is every 42 days we receive a Kelly day. And the way that states in our fire contract currently, a Kelly day is a pre-scheduled shift off taken at routine intervals. So that is something that we are inclined to also ask for, but vacation days are big. And then, as Bobby said, with the section point 8.0, we are covered by our CBA. And there's another example, I believe, in the policy 1.0. It also states that we are covered by our CBA. And then another example of, as Bobby was saying, this has been done now for 35 plus years, is we currently have 2 other members who are retiring, and they are entitled to all of their vacation days as well. So we have 2 guys who in the same year at the same time, and then we have 2 other guys who are being treated differently. And that's why, as Bobby stated, that we are fighting this because it will be affecting every member of the department.
Yeah, something I should have clarified at the beginning. I think what we prefer to do is handle each of these folks individually because there are different circumstances. So it would be clearer if you could speak to, let's say Chris Welch, for example, to begin with.
Yeah, the first item on the agenda was to discuss Chris Welch. So it would be helpful to try and pull that out, Mr. Canada, and just speak about Mr. Welch's case, so that then the city has an opportunity to respond only about Mr. Welch's case.
So Chris had turned in a 2-week notice intending to resign. He had also put in his vacation days. So our process for us taking our vacation days, we have to pick them by mid-December, maybe December 15th or just before that, to schedule our vacation days for the following year. So as past practice, Chris scheduled out his days just like anybody who had left before him. He thought he would be getting his days. As time went on, he was informed that that is now being prorated, citing policy 8.05. And so he then went through step 1 of the grievance, which was initially denied because there had not been he had not been informed yet that he was officially denied those days. Then he was informed, and then he restarted the grievance process, step 1, which got denied, went to step 2, denied, step 3, and here we are at step 4.
Unmuting. When did he resign in comparison to when he filed these grievances?
He left the department, I believe it was January 20th. But I cannot remember when, because he had turned in it
was March 4th is his resignation date, I believe is what the paper says here. Welch's March 4th resignation date. Or I don't know.
I think that's right.
Or that was his initial, sorry. Yeah.
That's what I see too. I see March 4th. I have a follow-up question. What's the difference for the union between resignation and retirement?
Bobby, correct me if I'm wrong, but they're essentially a member resigning is staying in the perf. So essentially he is leaving, maybe to go elsewhere to continue to work to get his pension, as someone who retires typically puts in for a drop, which is deferred retirement option plan. And that is set out 1 to 3 years in advance. And that retirement is different from a resignation where they are then receiving their pension in retirement.
And I see that Mr. Welch originally requested a resignation, not a retirement. Is that correct?
Chris Welch always intended to resign. He never intended to retire. I think you're thinking of Steve Coover, who initially said he was going to resign, and then he switched his to a retirement.
No, I see in the notes that were given to us that there was a resignation for Mr. Welch as well. Like he wrote a letter for resignation on, let me get that date, January 20th.
Yes, I believe that was the last day when he resigned.
Okay, so we're on the same page. Thank you.
Yep.
I had a question as well. You mentioned that there were two people who you said had been treated differently last year, and I was just wondering what that time period was, and were you referring to two different people than the ones we're talking about today? I just wanted to clarify that as well as the timing.
Yeah, so the two other individuals, one guy has 30 plus years on, and the other one, I think may have 25 plus, I'm not sure, but they've put their time in, and what they all four members put in to leave around the same time, and those two members got all of their benefit time.
Okay, any other questions relative to Chris Welch?
Yes, but I have a few. One for Mr. Canada, and I think it was Mr. Gold. So I also want to make sure that we are not talking about clothing allowance. Are we only talking now about vacation days and Kelly days?
So we are talking about everything that a member is entitled to receive. And under section 2.2.030B, it states that we are entitled to, by our CBA, vacation days, which a benefit time is also a Kelly day, and clothing allowance is also included in that. As I stated before, originally when we sat down with Jennifer Lloyd, Philippa Guthrie, and Carolina Shaw, we had just asked for vacation days only, which was denied. And then this grievance process had started.
Okay, so again, and asking that question, it was only because when you spoke, earlier, when you introduced yourself to us, you did not mention the clothing allowance. So I didn't know if that was something that you were not at this time asking for. So thank you for the clarification. The other, and again, I'm looking at the information that we were sent. It sounds as if we know that it was a policy in place that it looks like the city, I'll say that properly. So the city attorneys, Chief Moore and others, it was brought to their attention that you needed to work 2 weeks prior to whatever your last day of employment, if that was, in the case of a resignation. When did Firefighter Welch know of that policy?
I believe he was informed by Chief Moore in writing on December 31st. I could be wrong on the day though.
Okay, so he learned of that on December 31st, and at that time, it was also, he also learned that the vacation days that he had anticipated would also be prorated.
Yes.
Yep.
And this is, forgive me if I'm not familiar with all of the language within the CBA, but firefighters, I guess essentially your vacation days are not earned per se. They're just simply, you know, I guess, you know, if you're contracted to work for a year, you're allotted a certain number of days, correct?
Yeah. So after your first year, you get 5 vacation days. So
But those days do not roll over from year to year, correct?
no, correct.
So if you don't use them, you lose them.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, realizing that you can't necessarily speak to what was in firefighter Welch's head, but was he aware that from January 1, or excuse me, I think our fiscal period ends, is it June 30th to July 1st, right?
I believe the policy that has been cited after July 1st or on July 1st, then we have been told that firefighters are eligible for all benefit time.
I guess from an understanding that I'm just trying to figure out if I was a new firefighter, when would my 5 days of vacation time kick in? Like what date would I start the department that I would get those days?
So if you got, let's say you got hired in February 25th of 2019, you would not be allowed to take a vacation day until February of 2020.
Okay.
You would not be allowed a vacation day. You would get your Kelly day per se in 2019, but you would not be able to take a vacation day until 2000. Yeah.
You would have to complete 1 year to receive your vacation.
Okay. All right. And based on that understanding, it sounds like Firefighter Welch is aware of that.
He's aware that after his years of service, he is entitled to his years for vacation days. I believe is 12. Yeah, I believe it's 12 based on his years of service.
Well, wait. So, like you say, 12 vacation days, but I guess that's also including the Kelly days.
So it'd be 12 vacation days, and then we get 8 Kelly days, which is a predetermined day off.
And also the COVID day, right.
And then we had that for the other member who rolled his over.
But again, you just said the policy is you don't get vacation days rolled over.
Right. This was by the mayor giving us a day, an extra 24 hours.
Yeah. No, that's the COVID day, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's what Coover.
No, I'm talking about the vacation days.
Yeah, the vacation days
don't roll over. So it doesn't matter if I was there, I could have been there for 40 years, like whatever days that I got in 2019, they won't roll over to 2020.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's because in year 0, when you start, you do not get any days. After your first year, you get your 5 days.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And I've got to pull it up if you want to.
No. Okay. I think, and again, the other, it sounds like there's a practice in place that, and again, I know you're not the attorney for Firefighter Welch, but it sounds like there's a practice in place that essentially Chief Moore, city's attorneys, knew was illegal, or excuse me, it was being applied erroneously. They made corrections to that policy that have, in this case, negatively impacted firefighter Welch by a reduction in the, the vacation days, but also, I guess, by him not working the last 2 weeks, he is in violation of, or excuse me, not in violation, but at least based on the CBA that's in place, somehow he's not adhering to his end of the CBA by not working that 2 week period.
So within our CBA, it just states years of service equals vacation days. So
yeah, but I think that's essentially what this meeting that happened, I believe, on December 17th or what's it, December 8th. So I'm sorry. I know it was a meeting in December, but essentially the city proper, legal, Chief Moore, so forth, found out that they learned that the way that this policy has been applied it's been applied incorrectly, essentially, like, right? You would agree. It sounds like you were also at that meeting.
Yeah, I was there, and I guess I would have to disagree with you, and that's why we're here tonight. Based on your
So all right, so you disagree with the city's determination of how this policy, or I guess how they've, from your perspective, applied this policy that in a way that will result in a reduction of vacation days for firefighter Welch.
Yes, that's
yes.
That's
right, thank you.
All right, any other questions?
Yeah, I have hopefully not very many. I don't think it's many. So let me ask you this. You're not saying, I think this is fair to say, you're not saying that the city's taking away vacation time and Kelly time and all the entitlements or the things he earned on the job. Is that correct?
We're saying that the city informed us that his days would be prorated based off of a part-time employee policy, which does not cover, which under our CBA covers him through vacation days, Kelly, and clothing allowance.
So the city basically came back and said, if he wants all the things that he's entitled to, there's a process he has to follow. Those are the meetings in December. And you and he disagreed with what the city was saying then. Is that correct?
Yeah. So yeah, we had that meeting, and
you read the statements differently. You read the CBA differently. You read the regulations in place. You read them differently. Is that fair? So that's what we're not here. We're trying to figure out who's right about what.
So sorry to interrupt. The city came to us and they told us that they wanted to cite 1404 in the employee handbook, which is benefits upon resignation or retirement. Inside that, it cites a paid time off or a schedule of benefit time paid off, which is section 8.05, which is pay for unused paid time off upon separation from employment. In paragraph A, it talks about resigning and leaving in good standing, and part-time employees should be prorated based on a scheduled hour and calculated as follows. And so what we're saying is we don't agree that this policy in the employee handbook follows what the fire department follows. because we worked 12 consecutive months prior to ever earning a vacation day is what we're fighting. We work 12 consecutive months before earning that. We understand that our days don't roll over, but we also have to start scheduling our days in the December the prior year based on our vacation pick policy. So that's what employee Welch was doing. He was planning ahead, notified our fire department admin that this is my plan. I want to take these days at the beginning of the year based on past practice that has always been followed. And then on December 31st, got his statement saying you can no longer do that and you're going to be taking a prorated vacation schedule based on this 8.05 section in the employee handbook.
So let me ask you quickly, because we can move. I really want to hear from Ms. Lloyd, but I am very curious because you've used the term past practice a number of times. I would expect you to be saying instead, look, under the CBA, full stop, we get what we deserve what we get, and there's nothing that binds us other than that document. Instead, you said past practice and number. So I'm confused, and I'm going to ask Ms. Lloyd because I don't know why past practices have anything to do with anything. I can't figure it out.
Well,
so you give me 1 second. So, and I'm just confused. So you're saying the city citing a policy in contravention of the collective bargaining agreement. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not a labor lawyer. I'm not even a lawyer. And that seems wrong to me. The city couldn't, I'm going to ask Ms. Lloyd because that seems illegal that you're using a city policy. I don't know. It may be, it may not be. But so it sounds to me, and I don't know enough yet, that things were, as you've said, there were past practices for 35 plus years. At one point you said, for some reason that I can't figure out, the city said, look, this is not under the documents that control here. That's not, that past practice is in contravention of those documents. So we're going to set it from this moment forward, we're going to apply the policies that they should be. And this is why we're here. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I'd have to agree with everything you just said.
Okay. Good. Thank you.
All right. Any other comments or questions before we move to Ms. Lloyd?
I just have one clarifying question, and I'm just trying to, I agree with what Luisa just said, actually, and I just wanted to step back to the discussion about accrual and things like that. So I'm just trying to understand some of the other arguments. So when you said that after 1 year of service, somebody is entitled to 5 days, and then normally prior to January 1st is when you decide how you're going to schedule them out. So if somebody has worked for the department for 1 year and then they have 5 days that they can take, at that point in time, suppose they were not going to resign or retire or anything like that, they can take those 5 days at any time. Is that correct? So they could take them all in January or all in the first part of the year. There's nothing that says they have to spread them out through the year.
Exactly. That is correct.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else?
Okay. Ms. Lloyd.
Okay. Thank you. As Jordan and Bobby made pretty clear, there are issues that are part of both grievances that are common, and I'm going to talk about those in one portion of the presentation, and then I'll speak specifically to Mr. Welch's grievance. You had a memo that I sent to you, and it's not my intention to rehash that point by point, but there are 3 things that I want to kind of cover. First of all, explaining the relationship between the personnel manual and the collective bargaining agreement, and explaining why the personnel manual policies do in fact apply to this situation. Second, I want to talk about the past practice of the fire department and how we got to the situation where we are now. And third, I want to talk about Mr. Welch's grievance. Okay. To talk about the personnel manual provisions and why they apply. The City of Bloomington's personnel manual in page 1 states that sworn police officers and firefighters are specifically included in the application of the personnel manual, except to the extent that a portion of the personnel manual is in conflict with either the SOPs or with the collective bargaining agreement. And so for purposes of our discussion today, what that means is if there's a personnel manual policy on an issue that is not addressed in the collective bargaining agreement, then the personnel manual policy controls. The collective bargaining agreement does address how many vacation days a firefighter is credited with each year based on their years of longevity. And it also controls the number of Kelly days that a firefighter gets. And right now that's just 8 across the board. Every firefighter gets 8. But this collective bargaining agreement does not address what happens when a firefighter resigns or retires from the department. The personnel manual does specifically address this issue. And in 14.04 that Mr. Mccarter cited, it states that a union eligible employee who separates from the city in good standing is eligible for payment of accrued paid time off, prorated in accordance with section 8.05. And if you go back to 8.05, which I included in the memo that I sent to you, that sets out how the time should be prorated. And it basically says that if you retire in the first half of the year before July 1st, your vacation time for the year is prorated on a sliding scale based on how many months that you've worked through that time. And if you separate from the city on July 1st or later, you get the benefit of the entire time of vacation days that you were assigned at the start of the year. And I want to make clear, these are credited time off. This is not earned time off. And because that question came up earlier, these hours are given, these days, excuse me, are credited at the start of the year, but not earned going forward through the year. So if you look at the collective bargaining agreement and the personnel manual policy together, you could look at a firefighter who's worked for the department for 25 years, is entitled to 12 vacation days and 8 Kelly days at the start of the year. And if they work until July 1st or later, they get the benefit of the entire 20 days. If they leave at some point, June 30th or earlier in the year, they're going to have their time prorated. So this is the city policy, and this is how it interacts with the collective bargaining agreement. Now, as you've heard from the union, we have not been doing it this way in the fire department for a long time. I can't speak to whether or not it's been 35 years, but I think the union did demonstrate that it has been at least 4 years. And I want to make clear that there's a difference here when we're talking about how this practice has been applied between resignations and retirements, because this policy has been applied to retirements. The past practice allowed, as I've set out in the memo to you, it was called terminal leave, and it allowed the firefighter to use all of their benefit time before they left. This was not done according to any agreement, according to the collective bargaining agreement. It was not done according to any regulations or SOPs. It is just a practice that was being done. And I have talked to a lot of people and nobody seems to know why it started that way. It's very possible that at some time in the past, it was a practice that actually aligned with what our personnel policies were at that time. But as of this time right now, it is in conflict with our policies. So but nevertheless, we were doing it for retirees. If you look at the timesheets that the union submitted, these are actually all of it, excuse me, they submitted them to show what the practice has been in the past. If you look at it, all except 4 of those people, those timesheets were retirements or presented themselves to the city as being retirements. There were 4 people in there who are resignations. 2 of those resignations happened in the second half of the year, so they didn't have to be prorated. 1 of them happened in the first half of the year, and that employee actually only used the time that he was entitled to if it had been, under the proration policy. The 4th one was somebody who left under very turbulent circumstances, and I will flat out say that we got it wrong with that one employee. We did pay him some vacation time that he was not entitled to. We did not pay him any Kelly days that he might have claimed he was entitled to. So the practice was as it has gone overall, has been for retirees. And this is how we discovered that we had a problem, was that Captain Coover and Mr. Welch both announced to Chief Moore late in 2020 that they planned to resign, not retire, in March of 2021. They each intended to work 1 day in January in order to get credited for a whole new set of vacation days. And then they planned to use all those vacation days and not come into work again. This was a different set of circumstances from the usual terminal leave because it was a resignation and not a retirement. And Chief Moore brought this to the HR department and to the legal department to figure out what was what with it. And in the course of those discussions about what the city policy is on how leave is treated with separating employees, it was realized that BFD, the fire department, was doing this practice that was in contravention of the city policies. And in fact, anybody who either retires or resigns from the fire department in the first half of the year has their benefit time prorated. So this happened in mid-December. That takes us to where we are right now. Mr. Welch and Captain Coover kind of started out in a similar place. I'll talk about that a little bit and then they diverge, and I will talk about Mr. Welch. After they found out that their vacation time was going to be subject to proration, they enlisted the help of the union. And you heard about the meeting that Mr. Canada, Mr. Mccarter had with HR Director Caroline Shaw and Corporation Counsel Philippa Guthrie and me on December 17th to discuss the issue. And in response to one of the questions that came up earlier, the issue about whether or not you had to work for the last 2 weeks before your resignation, that was one of the things that was discussed in the meeting, specifically that you have to work for the last 2 weeks prior to a resignation, but you don't have to work the last 2 weeks prior to a retirement. So we did talk about it at that time on December 17th. But the other kind of the meat of what we talked about was that we made it clear at the meeting that the proration applied to both resignations and retirements, and that even though we'd been doing it wrong in the past, we were going to do it right going forward. And at that time, Mr. Canada and Mr. Mccarter brought up the fact that there were these 2 other Bloomington Fire Department employees who were scheduled to have their retirement in March, that they had put in the drop over a year prior, and they were locked in to their March dates because they made that decision at a time that nobody on either side knew that this practice was going on that was not accurate. And Mr. McWhorter and Mr. Canada asked if there was anything that could be done and if there's latitude for these employees. And we agreed that under the circumstances, the city would make an exception to honor the old practice for these 2 specific employees. So when the union talks about the fact that we have a plan that these 2 gentlemen who are retiring in March are going to get the benefit of the old practice. That's correct, because that's something that they asked for at the meeting and that we said we would be willing to grant based on the circumstances that they had made the decision and locked their date into place over a year prior. On December 31st, Chief Moore sent both Mr. Welch and Captain Coover a memo explaining what time they had available to them based on their longevity and their date of separation. And Mr. Welch was entitled to 4 vacation days and 2 Kelly days. I want to make a note about something that I said to you in my memo. I said that Mr. Welch had used 6 vacation days. In fact, that's not accurate. He claimed the use of 5 vacation days and 1 sick day on his 2021 time cards. Mr. Welch started the year, he did work on January 1st, as he had indicated that he planned to. And he, in his first pay period, which ran from the end of December to January 11th, he used 3 vacation days out of the 4 that he had coming to him, assuming that he resigned on March 4th, as he had said he would. And he was paid for those 3 days. The second pay period ran from January 11th to January 24th. During that pay period, Mr. Welch marked his time card to use his 4th and what would have been his final vacation day under the March 4th resignation. He marked down a 5th vacation day that he wasn't entitled to, or that he'd been told in advance that he wasn't entitled to, and a sick day. And then after that, on January 20th, he quit without prior notice of that date. In his final paycheck, he was paid for the sick day. But because he had changed his last date of work from March 4th to January 20th, he was only entitled to 2 vacation days. And he had already used more than 2 vacation days in his first paycheck, and he was paid for them. He was not paid for the additional days that he tried to claim in his second paycheck. When he quit without notice on January 20th, he hadn't worked the last 2 weeks that were required. He hadn't given 2 weeks notice of his departure date, and both of these are required for an employee to leave in good standing. So he did not leave in good standing. An employee who doesn't leave in good standing is not entitled to any portion of their credited time off upon resignation. So to the extent that Mr. Welch is claiming that he has any benefit time coming to him, he's wrong. Even if he were correct on the merits of his argument against the city or against prorating his time off, and we think he is not correct about that, he forfeited any claim to that time when he resigned the city. And for that reason, and all the reasons that I've stated going forward, his grievance should be denied.
Are there any questions for Ms. Lloyd?
So could I ask you, so had he only moved his, just to make sure that I understand what's going on here, if he had decided to retire July 2nd, we wouldn't be here, is that correct?
Yeah, and first let me clarify, he wasn't retiring, he was resigning. But yeah,
Okay.
if he had planned to resign on July 2nd, yes, we would not be here today.
And so that I am also clear, you don't agree that there's a conflict between these, which you started there, I just want to be clear. You said there's no conflict between the city policy, the handbook, and the CBA. That's correct?
That's right. The CBA talks about how much vacation time you get, but the personnel manual talks about what happens to it when you separate from employment. And it is similar to, in the personnel manual, we have one section on how much time off you get based on how long you've worked. Now, it's different in the personnel manual because we didn't negotiate for it. I didn't negotiate for that time, unlike the fire department. But then there's a whole separate section of this of the personnel manual that says, and then when you separate from the city, here's what happens on the year that you leave to the time that you have credited as of the time that you leave.
Final question. So, when I first read all the documents, I thought of equity. I thought of latches. I thought of ideas and equity, not law, about things we do out of, this is just how we've done it and it's fair to all if we just keep doing it until who knows when. But that's equity. I mean, and here we have documents in place and we have things that guide us, seems like. So I'm just wondering, the city, they just didn't know that this was happening. They discovered this and then now they say, well, look, we got to apply it sometime to somebody, right? We have policies for a reason. And let me just be clear. The reason I'm asking is because as I read through the documents, I couldn't figure out why we're here. Why not just say, look, fine, take your, we've done it 35 plus years or 4 or 10. One more. And now we really mean it from this moment, anybody who's ever had children, right? This one time, now, but you guys, sure, go ahead. So is the point that we just have to draw a line, or we have to apply our regulations and rules the way we have them in place?
Well, I think there's sort of a two-part answer to that. One is, yeah, you have to start at some point, and the point that you discover that you're doing it wrong is probably a good time to start. That being said, Mr. Welch's situation was not what the past practice had been. Mr. Welch was resigning. He was not retiring. The past policy that we had for terminal leave was what we were doing for retirees, and that was not Mr. Welch. So while I recognize that he may have seen a lot of other people leaving and thought that he was entitled to that, or that the policy was applying across the board, it wasn't. It was applying to retirees and not to resignations. So I appreciate the fact that he wanted the benefit, but even the past practice did not apply to his situation.
Thank you.
If I can, Kim.
Pardon me?
If I can, I'm sorry, I didn't know if you had a question or not.
No.
Okay. Ms. Lloyd, can you, I guess, I'd like to know the discovery of like this, so it sounds like there's essentially this practice that you all figure out was erroneous. And I'll admit that when I was reading the memo, there were times that I couldn't distinguish between whether or not the discussion of the resignations, and I know that we're talking about Firefighter Welch in particular, but I guess, was the discovery of the error prompted by the discussion about Firefighter Welch, as well as the other firefighter? And I'm saying that because if I completed paperwork with an understanding that this is how we've done something, and then essentially what I would consider to be the 25th hour, I'm learning that, oh no, that's not the case. Now, I believe that you, I don't want you to have to repeat yourself because I heard you crystal clear. You said this was done for retirement. And in Welch's case, he was only resigning. But I still would like to know, to Luis's point about equity, because again, it's very important that obviously, you know, we want to be in compliance, you know, certainly as a city of, you know, what's considered legal. And we realize that we have practices over time that just simply may have not kind of met that standard until someone began to somehow do audit or inventory to find out, hey, we actually are, you know, our employees have to actually work 2 weeks prior to, and certainly it sounds like in the case of the individuals that were retiring before, they had a full year. So they had essentially, I won't say earned those days, but at least the time that they've worked to earn the vacation time in order to kind of be able to be allotted their vacation days. But I think it would leave a sour taste in my mouth to know that essentially my case was the case where you all discovered the area and I happened to fall on the side of, you know, being somebody who receives a short end, certainly after a number of years, you know, and without this being a court and deposing firefighter, I don't know why I keep getting these names mixed up. I'm sorry. Welch. I would probably, you know, I wouldn't necessarily, you know, to the extent of having words or doing something where conduct will become unbecoming. So I wouldn't necessarily get ugly with somebody, but under the circumstances, I could see why somebody could quickly become ugly and subsequently, you know, leave the department under these circumstances in, you know, not in good standing. So I don't want to penalize somebody, you know, based on their expectation that something, you know, we've been doing something for a while. Again, I'm not going to make you repeat yourself because you made it very clear. In his case, Welch is resigning, not retiring. But, you know, I guess I don't want to hold that against him. But to go back to the original question, was the error discovered because of this case? And if so, then why can't the decision be, okay, all right, but now we need to make sure that in the discovery of this error, nobody should under those circumstances feel slighted by it from a perspective that we're just trying to correct. We recognize that you have to do it, but this ultimately is affecting, you know, the livelihood of these individuals, certainly their families and so forth. So I think I'd really like to know just about, I guess, how you all figured this out at this meeting. Like, what essentially, you know, was the giving to say, okay, we're going to let them go through, but you know what? And if it's to your argument, like I said, I'm not going to make you repeat yourself. Hey, in his case, Welch wasn't. He was resigning. He wasn't retiring. So the other two were just retiring. That was that, and I guess, you know, I have to live with it. I'm sorry, I'm wordy. I'm trained as a historian, so.
Thank you.
So to answer your question about how we got to, like, what triggered this discovery was that we had a situation where 2 employees were announcing that they had a resignation several months away and that they were planning to use all their benefit time that they believed that they had coming to them. And it was not in line with the expectation of the fire department based on what our past policy had been for retirees, not for resignations. And in the course of discussing this issue, the fire department brought this issue to the HR and the legal department. We're going through the issue of, you know, no, they're not entitled to it because this applies, this applies, this applies, and therefore they're not. And the fire department said, well, but we do it for retirees. And HR and legal said, well, you're not supposed to do it for retirees. And that's how we got to the point. In terms of the question of equity, you know, as you said,
Jennifer, just to interrupt, I just want to make sure. So it sounds like these 2 employees essentially prompted their resignations were the catalyst toward this new understanding of how the city would now be interpreting the policy, or forgive my, but it is essentially these two employees.
Yeah, that's correct. And then, but then going to your question about equity, about people making decisions based on what they reasonably believed was in place. That is what we considered when it was brought to our attention about the two other employees who were scheduled to retire in March, who had put in the drop, over a year prior. And that was a situation where up until that point, and at the time that they committed to their retirement date, everybody that they were interacting with on, their expectation, and at that time, the fire department's belief was that city policy allowed them to take all of their time prior to their resignation, or prior to their retirement. And taking that into consideration, we said, yeah, there is an equity issue here for these two guys. And therefore, we will address, we will honor the policy with these two retirees. So yes, we did take equity into consideration in terms of what people's reasonable expectations were at the time that they made decisions. But again, what was reasonable hinges on the question of whether or not you're resigning or whether or not you're retiring.
I have a question. Can you give me a better understanding of what retirement and resignation looks like for city protocol? Can you define those for us?
I think that Mr. Canada did a really good job of explaining the difference, that the resignation is at the point where you are terminating your employment with the city, but you're not, we're all under a pension plan. You're not at either an age or a decision that you're going to trigger the retirement benefits under the pension plan. So the resignation is you're separating from the city, either, to go on to another job, to live the good life somewhere else. But the retirement, you may be doing all of that, but you are also going through the perf process and using your, activating your pension benefits.
Okay. And then a follow-up question to that, what does good standing look like for the city department? What does that mean? Leave in good standing?
If you leave in good standing, it means, basically you're leaving on good terms with the city because you gave 2 weeks notice so that the city could prepare to the extent that it's able to prepare for the departure. Mm-hmm. And under city policy, if you're resigning, you work the last 2 weeks.
So whether or not an individual retires or resigns, good standing means you do not take, essentially you don't take vacation days during that 2 week period when you are considered in good standing.
It's different for resignation and retirement. If you're resigning, you're supposed to work the last 2 weeks. If you're retiring, that requirement doesn't apply.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
And to that point, I think that's being left out when someone resigns.
I'm sorry, Mr. Canada, but at this point, it's Ms. Lloyd's turn, and the board is asking questions of Ms. Lloyd. And so I'm going to interrupt and ask that you hold your piece at the moment.
Understood.
I think that was all for my question at the moment.
Okay.
And I just have a clarification again. I know you stated this early on, but then we've been asking a bunch of questions. I just want to clarify. So what you're saying is that the past practice of the 30 plus years was for retirements, not resignation. The individuals who were retiring previously is when this came up, and you realized it was erroneous as to, that the policy was erroneous as to retirements, but you honored, you chose to honor what the past practice was for the two retiring individuals, but not, but then the two individuals who were resigning, you're saying that there was no past practice of this policy applying to people resigning. Is that correct?
Yes.
So quickly on that point, this is a pretty straightforward case. There's no conflict anywhere. It's just reading the manual and a clear reading, and it gets us to, and then of course the resignation happened as it did, leave in not good standing, well then
Yeah.
there's nothing to talk about.
That's our position.
Is that fair?
All right.
Well, Luis, I wouldn't necessarily say that because I can understand how one, I guess, how you know, a decision could be made on essentially just, you know, again, an understanding of a policy. Again, you know, I think certainly in the discussion being brought to us, you know, from a perspective, I think Attorney Lloyd does lay it out where sounds like the city employee, or excuse me, where the city employee manual trumps or stands in when there is, I guess, the absence of information in the CBA. But I think there's a series of decisions though. And again, without having like accurate record, because again, everybody keeps saying 35 years. You know, I'm already at a place where, okay, if I was asked to be making a decision, I want records to see, like, yeah, we can see that it's consistently been applied only to retirements. Because if there's a case again where, and I'm not saying that, you know, Attorney Lloyd is not being truthful with us, but, you know, maybe, you know, firefighter, I am not going to say, ask for his name again.
Welch?
I'm sorry.
You got two choices, Hassan. There's Coover and there's Welch.
I got names in my head. I've been in Zoom meetings all, like, seriously. So I'm trying to keep stuff close. But I guess, but under the circumstances that, you know, he could say easily, like, yeah, I know guys who did resign and they still got their time. And then that becomes like something that, you know, of a back and forth. But nevertheless, go ahead, Louis.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm done.
The problem with that is, right, we're not a court of law. Heck, we're not even a court of equity.
Exactly.
Well, actually, that cuts the other way to me. All we have is the manual. We're not taking testimony from witnesses. We're not testing credibility. We're not doing anything. Here's a manual. Then the CBA doesn't say what, right? There's no conflict, assuming you agree with that. And I went to look at the letter from Mr. Welch, or Mr. Canada for Mr. Welch. And right, I wish I had seen it there. And I want to see where the conflict is. So the next day, well, look, there's a conflict. Because I was confused about that. If there's a conflict, how could the CBA be trumped by the policy of the city? That doesn't make any sense. Well, it turns out there's no tension. There's no tension. All we have is the documents. If all you have the documents, that's what we have. How could you, unless, right, then you go to binding arbitration, and then I might take,
exactly.
Well, but on the documents we have, I don't know what else we can do. And we've taken over an hour on something that to me seems really straightforward. I don't know what else to say.
Yeah,
it's really straightforward to me.
I agree. Thank
and
you.
gentlemen, I guess if I may, again, Chris Wheeler, City Legal, if you have more questions of Ms. Lloyd, then let's direct our questions to her, and then we can move to the discussion phase. We have heard from the union, we're hearing from the city, and then certainly you can have your discussion and decide whether you're ready to make a motion and vote.
Chris, can you let me know when it's appropriate for my comment?
Well, I think that it would be appropriate after the question and answer with Ms. Lloyd has finished for you to give a quick summation or rebuttal or whatever it is you want to say.
Thank you.
So we'll wait until then.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry about that, Chris. I was responding to Luis, and yep.
I'm not sorry.
No. I mean, I think like part of it is like we're getting into the discussion part, as he just said.
And I'm going to ask, do we have any more questions of Ms. Lloyd at this time?
No, thank you, Ms. Lloyd. At least not from me. Thank you.
Anyone else? No, okay. Can I?
And so at this point, Kim, I'm going to jump in one more time. Mr. Canada had one thing he wanted to comment on.
Okay,
And I think it's appropriate to let him make comment
okay,
on the one thing that he was wanting to bring up during Ms. Lloyd's conversation with.
sure.
She was talking about Chris Welch resigning and needing to work 2 weeks. As it states in the policy as well, the department head, Chief Moore, can sign off that he does not have to work that. And that is something under conversations, it seems, would be easily applied in this situation. But back to Chris's feelings of how upset he was also upset by the prorated days, and he was also, it was never officially stated to Chris or anyone else, but his secondary employment would be denied, which added to his frustration. So between that, and then I think we left out the part that the department head can sign off waiving the required 2 weeks to work. That's all. And I think Bobby may have something.
Well, no, we're not going to just keep going down the list.
Yeah.
And now, Ms. Lloyd, if you have anything to say in response to the thing that Mr. Canada just talked about, just specifically that, if there's anything Ms. Lloyd would like to say specifically about what Mr. Canada.
No, I don't think so. There was, he's correct that a department head does have the authority to waive the 2 week requirement, but that was not, it didn't come into play in this situation. That's all I'll say.
Okay. Can I please get a motion that the grievance filed by Chris Welch be denied?
I'm sorry, what are you asking? Say that one more time.
I'm asking for a motion that the grievance filed by Chris Welch be denied, which is what we're voting on. And then we can discuss it after the motion is made.
So again, and Chris, just for clarification, this is, if I so move on this, this is not my consent that we should deny it, but that we should at least engage in a motion.
Well, yeah, you can make the motion and then vote against it if you want, Hassan.
All right, yep, so move.
Do I have a second? You're on mute, Luis.
I have moved, I don't know how the record's going to show. I moved earlier. I can second. I'm
Oh,
happy to second.
thank you. Nicole, would you please take a vote? Roll vote?
Wait, let's,
Hang on a second, Kim. The next step is, okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Is there any discussion from the board on the motion?
Sorry, yeah.
well, to me, it's what I said before. It's not clear. See, we're getting into the details in the chat, right, about what happens and what people can do and what people have done. But that's right. I don't know how we could decide on those facts, or those allegations, right? We don't even know. All we have is, here's a policy, here's past practices, here's what we've done, we found out what the problem was and we fixed it. I mean, I don't know, short of taking testimony and doing what a court would do, I don't know, we're just taking sides just seemingly to me randomly.
Well, bear in mind, this is going to non-binding arbitration.
Right.
Anyway.
It has
So-
the opportunity to go to
Right,
non-binding arbitration, yes.
Right. And Louise, I'm in agreement with you. I think after hearing both sides, and I think when you, in my mind, correctly alluded to, listening to then testimony, then I realized that I don't have the expertise. I don't have the information that I would need in order to do that. And based on that, and I'm not sure if I can say this, but I'll be abstaining from at least this vote. I don't have enough information. I don't. I as much as I do not at all agree with the conduct, I'm very clear. I think the city Attorney Lloyd was very compelling in explaining, what the policy has been in terms of the CBA and city employee manual, and even leaning toward understanding that the policy has only been something that they've allowed retiring employees on, but nevertheless, we're taking her for word, and I think that's just without some sort of evidence. Let me stop talking. So,
sure.
There.
You got quiet towards the end, so I didn't know if you were done or not. For me, I'm at a place where I'm in agreement with Luis, and this is what we have. We have the facts. This is where we go. We have these manuals. We're going out off of these manuals. And so for me, I'm looking at what happens with good standing. Okay, you want to resign, go somewhere else or whatnot. And in this case, it's more so focused on resigning. And my focus is on what took place during the good standing portion. And that's more so what I'm focused on. And I think that's what is being brought upon is the good standing portion. And so that's kind of what I'm looking at.
And I wanted to add as well, since this is my first time doing something like this, and maybe this is a question for Chris, actually, I just wanted to clarify. It sounds like what we are being asked to do is just decide on the terms of the grievance that have been kind of presented to us, but not, as Luis said, we're not kind of assessing anyone's credibility or what past practice actually is or anything like that. We're just supposed to look at whether the policy controls or what the policy is that controls and whether it applies here. Is that correct? I just want to be clear on exactly what we should be thinking about.
The motion made is that the grievance, as it has been written and filed with the board, should be denied, which means that you're agreeing with the presentation of Ms. Lloyd and disagreeing with the presentation of Mr. Canada and the union. What you're being tasked with doing tonight is trying to determine whether there is a conflict between the documents or not. You're being asked to determine whether there is a practice that somehow the fire department should be required to continue to uphold that does not comply with the city or does. These are things that you have to wrestle with. At this point, there is a motion on the table that would suggest that the city is correct in its argument and the union is not correct. And so therefore you would be moving, well, you are, there's a motion on the table to deny the grievance. I hope that I'm not confused.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense. And I guess what everyone has said in turn is that they're focusing on a different aspect of that grievance, right? In order to come to a decision. Okay. Thank you.
All right. We ready for a vote?
Call the roll.
Nicole?
Alrighty. Kim,
Yes.
McQuiba,
Yes.
Luis.
You're on mute, Luis.
Of course I am. Yes.
Trudy.
Yes.
Rafi.
Abstain.
The result of the vote is 4 yeses and 1 abstain, no nos. The motion carries. The grievance filed by Mr. Welch through the union is denied. Certainly, the union has an opportunity to take that particular grievance up on non-binding arbitration. This brings us now to the next grievance, which is Mr. Coover's grievance.
So, Mr. Canada, is there something that you want to focus on Steve Coover's case?
Mr. Canada?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we definitely want to talk about this, and Bobby is prepared to speak on this. So I'll hand it over to him.
Thank you guys for your time tonight. I know this has taken longer than what you guys all anticipated. I wanted to say thank you for that. Steve Coover's grievance,
and again, I'm sorry, I'm going to ask you to please state your name for the recording.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Robert Mccarter, Jr., Vice President of the union. Steve Coover had originally signed up to resign, as we were talking about resigning employees, and then again got told about his prorated days that he would be allowed to take. He then chose to retire and marked his retirement date. He still has that date currently. And then so that is pretty much Steve Coover's grievance there. I will say that this isn't the first time that we've had an employee resign and not get their benefit days. We actually had an employee in 2019 that got their days consecutive from January 1 moving on. That was employee George Cornwall. You guys have that record. He resigned and moved on to another job of employment. And that's essentially what Mr. Coover wanted to do, was resign and move on. And then now he has chosen to retire. And you can add Canada if you want to, but that's the gist of Steve Coover's grievance.
Is it time for questions, or are we going? Mr. Canada, did you have
Mr. Canada was invited to speak if he had anything to add.
Okay.
Do you have anything further?
So it's the difference here between Welch and Coover. Coover is now retiring. And just as before, he was told that his days were going to be prorated. Not much has changed besides he is retiring. He's one guy who's retiring. The other guy is Chris Welch is resigning. So, and I guess my point that I would make is Ms. Lloyd is citing section 8.05. And if you read that, the proration is on paid part-time employees. I think that maybe I didn't clarify that earlier, but I wanted to now. And then even section 8.0 says we are covered by our CBA. So that is 805 is a subsection of section 8. That's all I have.
I hear you all bring up George, is it Cornwall?
Yes.
Am I saying? Okay. So I'm curious, how did he leave? Did he leave in good standing?
Yes.
Okay. And then,
and that was it. He resigned. He did not retire, I believe.
Right, but there's still so from my understanding, there's a 2-week period where there's good standing. And my question is, do you know if George left in good standing?
I
He
believe
did leave. Yeah, he left in good standing, but he did not work his last 2 weeks. He used vacation days and Kelly days to work that. And that's in the employee records that we gave to you guys.
Mhm.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify, since we brought that individual up. Another question that I have is Coover covered by the union?
yes.
Okay, and then what's the difference between excuse me for acronyms, I'm not really one for those. AFSCME.
We are, as a union, we are the IAFF. We are affiliated with the AFL-CIO CLC. So that is a International American Federal Legion, I believe. So we are the local, and then Indiana has a state union, and then there is a representative that has a district for the international. So that covers from Canada and through all 50 states for the international, and that's who we are affiliated with.
Okay.
And in the municipal code, it states that we are covered by that.
So AFSCME stands, are you aware of what that acronym is?
It's
not to put you on the spot. Okay, thank you.
I looked it up yesterday because I knew this question would come.
I got it. I see it in the chat. Thank you, Rafi. American Federation of State. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then my last question is, so it seems as if Mr. Coover found out if I resign, there's different penalties. Were you able to talk to him about that and why he changed from resigning to retirement?
I did not talk to him in detail of his choice, as it is his choice to do what he wants. If he wants to just up and leave or leave in good standing or whatnot. But he then decided to retire. I think it was a financial decision that was better for him and his family. And he was still denied and told that his days would be prorated.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question about AFSME union. Is the fire department affiliated with that union? And if so, how?
You're talking about AFSME?
Yeah, AFSME.
That is another union that is out there. The union that we are covered by is the American Federation of Labor and the Congress of Industrial Organizations.
Okay, so you're not affiliated at all with AFSME?
No, we are the IAFF.
Okay.
AFL CIO CLC.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions as well. So the first question, you may not be able to answer this, may actually be a question for Ms. Lloyd, but I'm just trying to figure out. So when you were discussing George Cornwall, is that the person she was referring to when she was saying there was somebody who left earlier, but there was just a mistake made?
She would have to answer that.
Okay. And then the other question I have is, it sounds like currently Mr. Coover is planning on retiring on March 27th. Is that still the case?
As far as I know.
Okay, and so the issue with him is that, or with his case, is that the city has one calculation of days that they want to pay him for, and the union and Mr. Coover has another calculation.
Yes, based on what the city is citing, Section 8.05, which we believe that is, as it says in there, part-time employees. And as our CBA states, as of January 1st, we are entitled to our vacation days.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anyone else?
Ms. Lloyd.
Thank you. Yeah, I would agree that, Shruti, I think you stated the issue with Mr. Coover pretty concisely. He started out planning to resign, and following the December 17th meeting, he changed to a retirement, and is claiming that he's entitled to what was afforded to retirees in the past practice. We talked about the fact that we did make an exception for 2 employees who are in a situation that where they had basically pre-scheduled their retirement based on information that nobody knew was inaccurate. That's not the case with Mr. Coover, who was aware of what the situation was at the time that he scheduled that he changed from resigning to a retirement. The issue with George Cornwall, his name has come up several times. He is another employee who left the fire department and went to Monroe Fire District, and that happened in 2018. He left several weeks. She left. His last day was in March of 2018, I believe. 2019. And he used all of his benefit time prior to his departure. At the time that he was using his benefit time, it was the belief of the fire administration that Mr. Cornwall was retiring. And at the point that he left, it was discovered that in fact he was resigning. So that ambiguity is actually perhaps even reflected in the title that the union gave to this sheet when they submitted it, that says Cornwall retire/resign 2019. Mr. Cornwall was treated as a retiree under the retiree practice because he was believed to be a retiree until he left. So that's the story of Mr. Cornwall. But going back to Mr. Coover, who was aware of the policy when he made his decisions, is subject to the policy that we've discussed at length. We believe that I've laid out in the memo that I sent to you the number of days off that he's entitled to. We're going to allow him, obviously he will be able to use the time that he is entitled to up until the point that he leaves. If he resigns and he still has a portion of that prorated time available to him, we'll pay it to him after he leaves, presuming that, as we all assume, that he will leave as an employee in good standing. But beyond that, he's not entitled to the additional days off. And our position is that the grievance should be denied.
I have a question. I don't think you can rebuttal, Mr. Canada, sorry. I have a question about the AFSCME. What is BMC 2.22.030? What is that?
Well, that is a Bloomington Municipal Code provision.
Mm-hmm.
And if you give me a minute, I can pull it up.
Sure, take your time.
Thanks. Will you give me the site again? It's
2.22.030.
Section B.
2B. Every time I say 2B, I think of, I'm gonna keep it to myself.
Okay. I'm there.
Mm-hmm.
What's your question regarding that?
What is that? Can you tell us what that is, please, for the record?
Sure. There is a section, this came into the memo that I sent to you because it is a section that had been cited to in prior submissions by the union and by Mr. Coover, Captain.
Okay.
The argument is that the language that is in that section of the Bloomington Municipal Code applies to firefighters because that section is entitled Union Eligible Employees. And the immediate response would be to think, well, that would include firefighters. However, it does not, because if you go further down in that section, there are definitions of terms used within that part of the ordinance. And one of them is what is a union eligible employee. And a union eligible employee for this portion of the ordinance is only an AFSCME employee. And the AFSCME employees are folks like our street department employees, CBU employees, fleet maintenance, the employees that come out of utilities and out of civil city primarily.
Okay, and so it doesn't, if a firefighter is not under this union, that doesn't mean that they are not with a union. So if they're not part of this specific union, that doesn't mean that Mr. Coover isn't part of a union?
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. Mr. Coover is absolutely part of a union. He's just part of a union that's not AFSCME.
Got it. I just wanted to clarify that for myself. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, any other questions?
I had one more question for Ms. Lloyd. I'm looking at, I have section 8.05 now, and I wanted to address the argument that the proration is applicable to part-time employees. And I guess the argument is based on under 8.05A, it talks about an employee, if an employee should retire or resign and leave in good standing, and then it has paid time off. And then it says part-time employees maximum shall be prorated based on scheduled hours and calculated as follows. And then it has 1, 2, 3, and 3 is where their prorated credited paid time off is. Is that right?
That's, yes. So, yeah. And what was your question specifically?
About the argument that the prorated sections are supposed to apply to part-time employees, not all employees.
Okay, so I am going to be the first to tell you that this last two sentences of this paragraph are inartfully written because they're ambiguous as to, they can be interpreted two ways, right? They can, however, the language of the sentence that you read, part-time employees maximum shall be prorated based on scheduled hours and calculated as follows. I think that sentence is intended to say that part-time employees, as well as the full-time employees that are the major portion of this paragraph, are to be prorated in this sense. And that's as identified by the line that follows. It says the employee shall be. And in looking at this and trying to recognizing the way that it is written, I did go back to the Bloomington Municipal Ordinance, which does, it does not, while it does not apply in this situation to, let me back up. While it does not apply, the language that we talked about in 2.02 is not applicable specifically to the fire department. The language does serve as a guide to what is intended in the personnel manual, and the language in the Bloomington Municipal Ordinance is very clear that the proration applies to both the full-time and the part-time employees. And if you go back on a separate track, if you go back to section 14.04, It just states that the proration gets applied in accordance with section 8.05. So the language applies to both part-time employees and full-time employees alike.
And so, oh, Shruti, did you have more?
Oh, sorry. I just wanted to make sure I'm understanding it. So I guess correct that what you're saying is even if the language in 8.05 is ambiguous and you would read it as not just part-time, but all employees, but even if that's ambiguous, it's the municipal code that controls, and that's not ambiguous. And then secondly, that 4.04 of the manual talks about 8.05 applying to both.
8.0.
Time.
I'm sorry. Are you?
Yeah, that was it. So I just want to make sure I have the arguments.
So the first part of your argument, yes, that the Bloomington Municipal Code makes it clear that the proration is supposed to apply to both part-time and full-time employees. As to the issue with 14.04, it references the chart in it references the proration standard of 8.05 for resigning employees, period.
And that's the that's the union eligible employee is section 4.04.
Correct. And just because this is all confusing, in the personnel manual, union eligible employee has a different definition than in the Bloomington Municipal Code. Union eligible employee in the personnel manual also includes firefighter, police officers, and AFSCME.
And I guess I'm just looking at 4.04 now, and I think it could be ambiguous in the same way that 8.05 is, because neither of them really specifies. And then 14.04 just looks back at section 805. So then I would go to the municipal code, right? And then where is that language? I just want to make sure I have all of it.
That's going to take me just a second.
Just because I understand the memo to be only relying on 8.05, not on the municipal code.
Yes, and you're correct. The memo relies on 8.05. 8.05 can be interpreted using the Bloomington Municipal Ordinance. And sorry, give me just a second. All right, here it is. An employee who resigns and leaves in good standing after giving proper notice shall be paid for unused PTO up to a maximum of 40 days for regular full-time employees. The maximum will, and here's where it clarifies, the maximum will be prorated for regular part-time employees based on their regularly scheduled hours. And then it will be calculated as follows. So that is basically mirroring the same language. It says that we're going to prorate for full-time employees, and we're going to prorate for part-time employees based on the number of hours that they work. But everybody is prorated.
And I'm going to jump in and make a clarification here. And Shruti, just correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Shruti was looking for the actual section of the Bloomington Municipal Code. What's that section number in addition to the language?
Yeah, and I'll work my way backwards and tell you.
It's actually not easy to do. I'm right there. It's 222,030. I think it's 4. You know, the parentheses 4. Then you go, there's some tables there, and then you go below 4C, I believe.
Yes, 2.22.030 or
It's 4C.
yes, that's correct.
Ms. Lloyd, could I ask you, so is that to say that the language is unclear, you read together, this language clarifies the other? Like the other is just language is just, it's not as clear as we would want it to be sometimes. And humans writing it means sometimes we are not clear, but read together. Like, you know, they call it intertextualism. You just read common language in different places and you can figure out, and that's what you did, I'm assuming, you and Ms. Guthrie and HR, you read these things together and you came to this point. Is that fair?
That's correct.
And can I ask where you're looking at this section? Because the municipal code section I have is the 2.34. I'm just trying to.
2.22.030 4.
There's some big tables on there.
Yeah.
And then right after the last table.
Do you happen to have a link for that we can just click, or I'm just.
Yeah.
I just don't want to waste everyone's time while I try to find it. Sorry.
Let me see if it.
I can email you a link, Trudy.
See if that works. That's what I have on here. Did it open?
Okay, yes. So I see 2.22030.
Then go after the table. The last table says hours worked per week, and it says years 2 to 12 and greater. And then right below that, carry over banking and pay upon separation. That paragraph.
Okay, so that's C. And this is the one that's.
Ms. Lloyd read from an employee, like line 9, 8, line 7, an employee who resigns and leaves in good standing. That line.
Okay. Okay, and I see that just uses employee and doesn't say anything about part-time, except earlier where it's talking about the maximum prorated for part-time employees.
Correct. And I'll draw your attention, well, you don't have it in front of you, so I can't draw your attention, but in the personnel manual itself, at the beginning, section 1.02 says statement of authority, and it says that it shall be the responsibility of the human resources director to interpret these policies and procedures and to ensure that they are administered in a consistent and impartial manner. And I can tell you that as we've talked about, the director of human resources was an integral part of the interpretation and decision making that happened in this case. And the way that it has been interpreted by the city has been consistent straight through, that it applies across the board to both full-time and part-time employees when we're talking about the proration. So there's authority both outside and inside the personnel manual for how we've interpreted this.
Can you clarify? Go ahead.
Sorry, in addition to the authority, that's the position of the human resources person that
Correct.
you
Correct.
Can you clarify with the memo state, can you clarify what we're looking for Captain Coover? Because I see that there's this option to pay him the value of any portion that the time remains unused. So what is that time remain unused?
So under the city's position is that Captain Coover is entitled to receive, sorry. our position is that he is entitled to receive 6 vacation days, 4 Kelly days, and the 1 COVID benefit day that I think that you understand what we're talking about that carried over.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Oh, he has 2 options. He can use some or he can use some or just about all of that time between now and the time that he retires. And the caveat I put on that is that because the Kelly days are scheduled by the city and not by the firefighter, I believe 2 of his 4 prorated Kelly days won't fall within the time of within the 3 months that he's there. So that those 2 Kelly days, along with any other benefit time that we believe that he's entitled to, but he has not used yet by the time that he leaves, we will pay him the value of those at the time that he separates.
And it's saying that he's looking to separate March 27th?
Yes.
Okay. And then, so where is 12 coming from? So would there have ever been an option for him to have 12 vacation days?
If he had retired on a date that was July 1st or later, he would have gotten the benefit of all 12 vacation days, in addition to the 8 Kelly days and the 1 carryover day.
Okay. And then this is my last question. So Mr. Coover, what I'm reading, I'm just looking at what I see. I'm reading that he had a meeting, learned that resignation wasn't the case. So now I'm gonna take a retirement because it's under, it's basically protected for him to get that entitlement for those 12 vacation days. Is that correct?
No. Well, first of all, so Mr. Coover's representatives had the meeting on December 17th. Mr. Coover was not at that meeting. His union representation was. After that meeting, he changed from resigning to retiring. I can't speak to what his reasoning was for doing that.
And that was before January 1, is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Jennifer, I just want to clarify, it says in your memo in the paragraph right before the conclusion that Mr. Coover is entitled to payment of 7 vacation days and currently scheduled Kelly days, and that he'll also get payment for 2 unused Kelly days if he resigns in good standing.
Yes, and I lumped together the 6 vacation days that he gets prorated plus the 1 COVID benefit day. I lumped those together to get the 7 days.
Do you mean if he retires in good standing? Because he's retired?
Yes, you're right. I made an error in that.
Oh, okay.
That sentence. He is retiring, correct. If he separates from the city in good standing, he is entitled to this.
Got it. Thank you. Any other questions? Luis, do you have a question?
Same as before. So we're disagreeing about, I mean, you're saying there's no tension here. The CBA doesn't speak to this question. It's silent on it. City policy and the municipal code, every document we have points the other direction. Hence, you reach this conclusion and this is where we are. Is that fair?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I just had one more question. I just wanted to clarify the timeline. So you were saying that Mr. Coover was notified of the difference between the resignation and the retirement policy on December 17th, or at least his representatives were. And then I know we'd asked early on about there were these 2 other people somewhat close in time who had made this decision, had made the decision as to what date they would retire a year in advance or something like that. But but the retirements were close in time, right? The actual retirements were in late 2020 or early 2021. Is that correct for these 2 other people where they got the
2 other people are also scheduled to retire in March. They had to commit to that date. a long time in advance.
So the key difference between those individuals and Mr. Coover is that they committed to the date in advance of notification about the proration policy, or that the previous policy was incorrect and it should have been applied in this way. And you're saying that Mr. Coover chose to retire after being notified of the way that calculation would move forward.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions before I call for a motion? Can I get a motion that the grievance filed by Steve Coover?
Wait, Kim, I just wanted to ask, are we going to allow a rebuttal at this round, or is that not happening since we did it earlier?
McQueen, I don't think Mr. Canada asked to give any
Okay.
additional comment, but certainly Mr. McCorder, Mr. Canada, do you have additional comment?
And the reason why I asked that is because I know he had a
That's cool.
follow-up.
Good point.
Yeah, it just seems that within the municipal code, it says that we aren't a part of it, even though 2.22.03 states that we are. I didn't see the page where it says it's only to AFSCME only. So that's a bit confusing. And then, as I said earlier, 805 is a subsection of 8 where it states that when a bargaining unit is represented by a union, the employee gets all of its benefit time. That's also in the policy. It just seems that whatever our CBA says, the city disagrees with, then we find policy in the handbook that they cite, and we're told that it's wrong. So I'm not sure what's what at this point. It's a little frustrating on my end, especially when section 1.01 says that the person, when we go through, police officers and firefighters are included in this manual except by a CBA. So are we covered by our CBA, or are we going off policy?
And Ms. Lloyd, if you have any comment to make specifically on the comments just made by Mr. Canada.
Sure. I want to disagree with Mr. Canada on what section 8.0 says, because it does not say that union eligible employees get all their benefit time paid out. It says that benefit time is governed by their collective bargaining agreement. And it is. The benefit time that firefighters get is determined in the collective bargaining agreement as to how many days off they get based on longevity and what their Kelly days are. What's not addressed in the collective bargaining agreement is how that time is treated when they separate from employment. And as I stated kind of back at the top of it, section 1.0 in the personnel manual says that if something is not addressed in the collective bargaining agreement, then the personnel manual controls. So that's the that's the end of my comment.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to disagree and rely on our CBA.
I mean, if I can real quick, I know I'm unmuted, but we do have a standard operating policy here at the department. Everybody keeps
Mr.
saying
McCorder, are you going to specifically address what Ms. Lloyd just said?
Yeah, with our CBA, how she's saying our CBA is silent, because we have policies here, vacation pick policy.
Which would you, Mr. McCorder, would you please direct us to the section of the CBA that discusses what happens when you resign?
There isn't one.
Okay, so there isn't any. Tell me what section of the CBA discusses what happens when you retire.
There isn't one.
Thank you.
All righty. So can I get a motion that the grievance filed by Steve Coover be denied?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Nicole, can we take a roll vote?
Is there any discussion on the motion?
Sorry, yes.
My part where I'm at right now, for me, and I'm looking at the material based off of what Louise said earlier, he really got me thinking. So thank you, Louise, for that. But so for Mr. Coover, I feel like his case is different because at first he was in a space of resignation, but then he later learned that perhaps he should do a different route, and he decided to do retirement for whatever reason that is. And for me, that falls within what took place previously. And something I think the city and the union should have a discussion about including that in their policy. That's their business. But based off of, I feel as if Mr. Coover learning and figuring something out, my position is in a different space for this case.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm agreeing or disagreeing with you, but I did want to say that I do find this it's very confusing, right? I mean, we just went through this very carefully, and I think I understand it now. This is after reading memos and all this discussion, and I completely see. I think it's very confusing, and I completely see how things could be interpreted in different ways. And that's why I was also thinking not only of the language, but sort of the equity involved. And I do think that, and again, I don't know if I'm agreeing or disagreeing with the statement that I just heard, but it does seem to me that there is room and a need for discussion, right, as to how to apply these policies clearly and consistently moving forward. In a way that everybody understands the consequences, and and how just a couple of dates moving back and forth a couple of months can have really big consequences, right? And I think that's hard to figure out from the way all the different documents are. And so I hope at least that this process has clarified some of that moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. We are in a place we've been before with this board, which is things come to us. And here we are hamstrung, which is something where we started, in fact, tonight. There's a million things flying through back and forth. And there's all the, like Trudy, as you said, here we are trying to read this manual, and then you go to the next section, the other section. And so here's what we have. I mean, in the end, this board is being asked to, in the space of a few hours, to, in fact, not decide anything. I mean, we're not deciding, we're taking sides. And we don't have the benefit of, as before, right? As you go to I went to the chat again, I see the gentleman from the union, right? They direct us places. I'm trying to catch up and go to where they send me, and I don't see what they're seeing. But then I want to ask him, but I can't. That is not what we're doing. We're not doing a trial yet again. We're not doing, so we have a sensible reading of, but this is one of those where this is basic constitutional or statutory interpretation, right? It's a hard question. You're going to defer to the decision maker, to somebody whose reading controls. And to me, the more persuasive one is the cities, only because when I put it all together, it's plausible. It's not implausible. And the other reading, I don't see it. I can't even see it, and I'm trying, right, which is a problem with this board. But what they're asking us to do, to piece together an argument or a position that I don't, I mean, it would take me longer. I have to then go read the street, as you said. I tried too. I went to look up these documents, and I'm trying to read them and trying to make sense of them. Of course, and then here we are. We have a motion. We have to vote on it. And thankfully, we're not the final. Not thankfully, actually, I take that back. In the end, we're not, because we're not giving the tools to decide this question. All we have is, well, the city made a claim. It's reasonable. the other one is not unreasonable, but it doesn't read as well as this one to me, based on my 1 hour that I spent on it tonight, directed to the places that I should have been directed to. And so that's all I have. That's all we have. Now, I wouldn't abstain. I'd just say, look, we, as the people before us, we're going to just decide and give it to somebody else, I guess.
And I guess to this, I would only add, I probably spent the most time reading over firefighter Coover's case. I think that the distinction certainly between resignation, retirement. Again, I was thankful to get answers for some of the questions related to, the way firefighters acquire vacation time. Again, from this perspective, I do see my role as, one that I am, representing, the voice, one of the voices of the residents of our community. And as part of that, we essentially are being asked to choose. Again, I'll abstain because I do feel like the way that the information and decisions that have come, where these are policy decisions that, again, affect people's lives and livelihood. And again, we don't have information, as you correctly indicated, Louise, as we're not a judicial body, but nevertheless, and that also doesn't mean that we have to necessarily take a side. And if the information is not present, that is requiring us to take a side, then I guess, well, that it's sufficient enough for me to abstain from the vote. Kim, I'm sorry I interrupted you. It looked like you were about to talk.
Who?
Madam
Me?
Chair, yes, Madam Chair, I'm sorry. I didn't know
Oh, yeah, you're fine.
I preempted your remarks.
I guess I just, I want to, this is me highlighting the positive, but, at least now we have alignment between the fire department policy and the city of Bloomington personnel policy. So going forward, we have that to benefit from. And Jordan, you're still there, aren't you?
Yeah.
Thank you. And Robert, you have an opportunity in your collective bargaining agreement to address this gap, in citing resignation and retirement policies and how they might align. So
Could I quickly say, very quickly in response?
We're still in discussion about the motion,
Okay.
folks. I'd like to remind you all that.
Right.
So I just want to be clear that I am not seeking to make policy. Just want to be really clear. In fact, I'm doing the opposite. I'm suggesting that I'm not reading these documents and saying I read them this way, that way, or the other way. I'm deferring to those who read the documents and suggesting they have the better read, but not the read I prefer, not the read I'd like. In fact, that's not true. We don't really represent the citizens of Bloomington, unfortunately. We serve at the pleasure of the mayor, unfortunately, or not. And so I do think of myself as somebody who represents the people of Bloomington, though we don't really, that we could get fired or we could be kicked off the board tomorrow, to be fair, or not. So let me just be clear. If it were up to me, we might come out differently, but it's not up to me. Hence, the point I made about I am reading these documents the way I do, the best reading I can give them in light of what it's presented to me. I'd like to know more. I don't have more. And makes me crazy uncomfortable, by the way. But it is, I wish I could, I don't have it to, other than to just defer. And then, of course, thankfully for us, we're not the final word. So
Okay, are we ready to vote?
Can I just briefly add to what Luis said? I did want to agree with that and say that I too feel like we're in a position where we're deferring, but I also think all of the, the information and arguments we heard, I think that the arguments were all definitely made in good faith and based on reasonable understandings of what was going on. And so that's where I come down in terms of additional information. I think moving forward also, I think there's different ways that all of this can be addressed, and I think clarity is really important. I mean, this is so convoluted for something that shouldn't be so convoluted, right? So
I agree.
All righty. Nicole, would you please take a roll call vote?
Yes, Kim.
Yes.
McLeeba.
No.
Luis. You are muted, Luis.
Trying to be nice to people. Yes.
Trudy.
yes.
Rafi.
Abstain.
All right, the vote is 3 yeses, 1 no, and 1 abstention. The motion carries. The grievance as filed is denied. This grievance may be taken up upon request to non-binding arbitration. Thank you all.
All righty, we have 2 more agenda items, and I just closed my document. Do we have any comments from the public?
Yeah, this is the petitions and communications section. So folks who wish to give comment have 3 minutes to speak.
Correct.
And as a reminder to do that, you will use the raise your hand function or indicate so in the chat.
And again, Nicole, if you can indicate that, you can type a message in the chat to inform anyone that is here from the public of the requirements for petitions and communications.
Nicole, I'm assuming we don't have anyone wishing to speak?
I am typing the instructions out.
Oh, okay.
As Rafi requested.
All right. I think it's safe to say that no one wishes to speak. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you, everybody.